And life requires, it asks of you, it begs of you to find your path. It's there, it's in you, and it's innate. Like you have it in your spirit, in your soul, in your center. I don't care if you're spiritual or religious or anything. It's not even what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about something fucking animates you, and that has a path in it. So go find it. And if you got to keep looking for it day after day after day, that's probably a good thing. It's much better than just trying to be like, when do I rest? When do I rest? You'll rest when you need, sleep when you need to sleep, eat when you need to eat, play when you play, work when you work, but don't stop. Don't stop living, Don't give up. Don't give up on your life and just exist. Finding your path is just acknowledging that you're more than existing.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
It feels like the last little while, Brandon, we've been taking a little trip down memory lane, a little bit of nostalgia, maybe diving a little deeper into some things. And I think that's always good to do. Yeah. So, the last couple episodes were kind of a special to talk about like the launch of our podcast and the free downloadable thing that we put out, the Creative Jumpstarter.
You mean the launch of our website?
What did I say? Did I say
the launch of our podcast?
Oh, the launch of our website. Yeah, the launch of the website.
WayoftheArtist.com. People, go check it out.
And I guess we just are in that space of, it's like, well, let's revisit some other things, but let's see where else we can go. Let's see if we can dig a little deeper. Most of the stuff that we talk about are things that you can always go deeper with. So why the hell not? So we've talked about in the early episodes about finding your path, right? But today we're calling this one, You're Always Finding Your Path. I love this. I love this, Brandon.
I love it too, man. I think, I think when we were talking about what we talk about today, it's kind of something that we kind of have always known, but we were realizing that like in one of our first episodes, which is like finding your path, it kind of might sound like you find your path and then you're on it and then you embrace it. And it's just like, once you have it, you have it. And something I think that we both have learned as we've gone down this road is that you're always finding it. It's something you're rediscovering, it's not like you might find it and then you might find yourself off of it at some point and you got to find your way back to it. Or you might think this is the path you want to go, and then you've gone down it certain ways and you realize, oh, it isn't. And then you refind, or you find something else, or you kind of course correct a little bit. And so there's always a sense of you're finding it and you're even discovering it. Whatever you think you found, you're also discovering it as you go down it too. So there's a certain finding element in that as well.
Yeah. And I'll add another element to that as well. Sometimes getting lost is part of finding it. Sometimes it's getting completely lost where you actually find the path that you didn't know you were looking for, where you find something you didn't know was what you were searching for the whole time. That's a part of this equation as well.
Another thing I just realized is sometimes you might find that you're not on the right path. And I think it takes an intelligent, wise person to recognize I'm not going the right way and I'm going to change course. I know that's happened for me where I genuinely thought, oh, this is what I want. I found my way. And then, new information comes along, new things happen. And then you realize, you know what, this is the wrong way. This is not actually, I thought it was something, but it wasn't what I thought it was. And now that I'm more aware and I've kind of discovered more and learned more, I don't want this, this isn't what I want for myself. And I think it takes a very not just intelligent and wise person, but also a courageous person, because there's a fallacy. It's
the sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost fallacy. You've walked down the road so far, you've invested so much in it that you go, well, I've put so much into it, I have to do it now. And it's like, no, you don't. Like sometimes you're on a losing bet. You're going down something and it's only going to cost you more and more and more. And if you just realize at a certain point, this is not an investment, this is a debt, this is an expense, this is costing me, you might just go, you know what, doesn't matter how much I spent so far, the return is not coming from this, I'm going another way.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's just been miserable the whole way through.
Totally.
It's not that it should come easy, but if it's I think we were talking about this in one of our laws from the last week, but if it's completely devoid of any joy, what you're doing, it might be time to relook, right? And we've been sort of indicating that there's always this new intake of response and information from the world. We are in relationship and in relation to everything, and we have to pay attention to those things. So it's like, we can sort of find our paths, right? Like we discover a direction for us to go into, and we get on, and you're on your path, but sometimes you don't get too far down that path until you're like, I'm not entirely sure where I am right now. That can set in quite quickly, right? And to a point where you need to just take in sort of, well, what are you getting, and using all of your senses, and I would say again, like your attention, your continual attention on what's happening as you're on this path. Like, it's because, as you said off the top, it's not just a thing of like, oh, I found it, like you've got it, and it's something that you can throw in a little package and carry around with you everywhere you go. That's like, they're all just pieces of the path, right? Like they're all just pieces, and you keep on finding and discovering new pieces of it as you go along, but you don't necessarily know what each next piece is going to present itself to you. And it's only through our attention to, I don't know, whatever, every faculty of our intelligence that we have available to us, as well as making mistakes as well, right? Like making those mistakes. But again, those mistakes are not necessarily mistakes when you use them properly. When you use your mistakes wisely, the mistakes are actually the thing that inform you and are the things that get you onto your path. Like, I just as a little sort of example of this that I love in action is with with my students and in teaching Meisner to actors and whoever ends up in my classes who's interested. But there's this whole message that I love about it, and is so exciting to see as students really understand it. Because Brandon, you're familiar with the process of like the repetition of people being in the moment with each other, and you're just repeating, like after it's like you're nodding your head right now. I'm nodding my head right now. Yeah. You're smiling, all this stuff, and this might not make any sense to anyone who's listening right now, but I'm just looking at Brandon and seeing what he's doing. This is kind of the simple essence of what the work is that that I do. Is like, well, we're just going to repeat each other, and then as we notice new things happening in the moment in your partner and with what's happening between you, you just express that right in the moment, and it's just a way of continually finding your way in the moment with each other. And one of the things that's so beautiful about it is there's this sense of like, oh, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? And sometimes, mistakes happen, right? Quote unquote mistakes. But there's a whole ethos and saying that we have, where it's like it's all grist for the mill, including the mill, that there are no mistakes, only new things to work off of. So somebody, stumbles or fumbles over their words, or stutters, or completely, sometimes just their mind completely trails off, and they disengage from their partner and what's going on. And it's all totally fine, because I'm like, the moment that you acknowledge that, and she's like, oh, whoa, I totally trailed off there. You did totally trail off there. I totally trailed off there. It's like you're back in the game, right? That just becomes the place that you work from now, right? And when you do that, those mistakes only last for a second.
Yeah.
They only last for a second, but only if you allow them to move, like through the acknowledgement, and then you can move through it, right? But I think that's where I think we can dwell too much on the mistakes, right? And that's when it becomes really, really painful. But they can instruct you, they can direct you, they can inform you more than almost anything else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think mistakes are part of the game. They're part of life. You gotta kind of embrace that, and you gotta accept that there is no perfection. At some point, everything fails. Everything, and because you don't know the way, as if there were some way to know, because you don't know everything that's coming and everything to expect, you have to be willing to accept that you're going to come across things that are unexpected. You're going to come across options, and they're both going to be appealing. And I think that, finding your way, you might come to a crossroads, and one way seems good and the other one seems equally good. And you're like, well, how do I make a decision here? And I think, that's where you really begin to learn, okay, well, maybe the first time you just go, okay, well, we flip a coin, right? And heads, we go left, tails, we go right. And it turns out to be tails. So we went right, and turned out that right was wrong. And left was right. You know what I mean? So now you're like, okay, so you come up to another crossroad, and the flipping the coin thing was one way to do it, but you go, okay, well, that's not good enough. That's not a way I want to handle these moments. So let's maybe go with maybe use a different sense. How does this look? How does that look? How does this feel? How does that feel? Right. And maybe you start to get a sense thing about it. And then that can be incorporated into your finding your way model, right? It's not and you had to learn to do that. Maybe the initial way that you used to choose your path was by whatever was most convenient, right? And then you said, okay, well, I'm not going to go with what's most convenient. I'm going to go by, whatever the lottery is, flip the coin, right? Then the next thing is, okay, I'm going to go by feeling. And meanwhile, you've been building all of these different skills on how to find your way. And you've been finding out which ones are good and which ones are not so good. And you've been, and it's that's part of the play, right? That's, and I think when, one of the laws we talked about again recently was the law of play. Something I've been going back to a lot is what if these choices don't have to be this really difficult thing? They can be more playful, they can be more you know what? Let's go this way. Let's see what happens, and sometimes, what I find funny about hiking, because, I do a lot of that, is that I'm like, I get to these crossroads on trails and I'm like, oh man, which way do I go? And it's like, I kind of know that this is the trail, but that also seems interesting. Well, maybe I'll walk down it a little bit. And then I start walking down, I'm like, oh, that's pretty nice. And then I find out that trail actually just ended up connected to the other trail just at a later point. And I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, the choice led to the same place. But I could have gone left and I could have gone right, but it all ended up in the same area anyway. So it didn't really matter. Which I
got a little different scenery on the way.
Exactly. Yeah. So, ultimately I was headed to the same place, top of the mountain to lake, whatever it might be. But the way I went there was just a different experience, and maybe in some ways finding your path is just going well, what's the experience I want to have, as opposed to what's the right way.
And in some ways, the only experience that because you can't necessarily know what the experience is going to be. You can make a very mindful, conscious decision
Sure.
to go down one path, and it's still going to spring up all kinds of surprises and things you didn't expect. And, maybe things that will challenge you, severely. But that's not to say that it was the wrong choice, right? In fact, life is usually a little bit better if you kind of look at it as like, well, this was the best choice for me as a human being for whatever reason. You don't have to believe that, like that might sound woo woo to some people, where it's just like, oh yeah, like it's all perfect and it was all designed and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like, what happens to your life if you decide to look at it that way? There's more creative options that way. There's a little bit more of a sense of lightness that comes with it that way. That you can spend more time just paying attention and learning your lessons, and then like moaning and groaning about the things that didn't go as you might have liked them to go, right? But yeah, there's so many interesting threads that we can pull on here. One of the things I wanted to comment on, as far as using this metaphor of like sort of the crossroads, or, you have different paths that present themselves to you at a certain point. You go, oh, I have to make a choice here. I have to choose, and how we choose that thing. And this is, again, running the risk of creating a greater sense of mystery than it's probably necessary. Even for myself, just like recently, and I mean, as in recently as the last few days, where I've kind of hit a crossroads with some things and had a sudden sort of clarity and insight about which path that I want to take, that, again, I don't know exactly how it will work out. And the path that I'm taking, from information that I have learned from a number of teachers and mentors that I have had in the past, this thing that I'm about to do.
So cryptic.
I know, it's like it's probably, like I said, it's going to sound more mysterious than it deserves. But basically, I know that there's a lot of people who have taught me, who would say that the decision I'm making isn't the right one. I can hear the arguments in my head. I know, and I understand where they're coming from, however, there's this opportunity to do something different that is so exciting to me. It's still scary, but it's so exciting to me that I have to do it. I have to go and at least try. I have to go up that path a little ways to see what's there. to borrow from your metaphor, Brandon. But I have to do it. And despite what sort of the learnings that people have shared with me would indicate, sometimes you have to make a decision based on something else. Right? And I feel more excited than I have in a long time about anything to a certain extent. I'll keep everybody posted as the couple over the coming weeks, I guess, as to what this is. The mystery shall be revealed to everyone. Because, Brandon, you don't even know. Nobody knows. This is something I'm keeping secret to myself. It's my secret path, Brandon. It's my secret path that I'm taking. But that's sometimes the kinds of decisions that you have to make, where there's just, for some reason, something has such a strong pull to it that goes against everything you've learned and you've been taught. And you have to follow that thing. You have to follow that excitement. And I'll say, like, even since I have like come to this decision, I guess, every now and then, like, these doubts are just like popping up. It's just like, well, you can't really do it. Maybe there's maybe we can soften that decision a little bit. Maybe we can, and just having to come back and say, like, no, trust that initial feeling, trust that initial sense, especially when it comes in very clear, and it didn't come in clear for a long time. We're talking like weeks, if not maybe even months, of this sort of giant question mark in the air of, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this thing that I've been doing for the last, however long it is, last number of years? And just sitting in that uncertainty for a while, and it's uncomfortable, and it leads to some really tough days for sure. And then there's a moment of clarity, and you just kind of have to go with it. So I'm going to stop talking because I've been talking for a bit. So take it away, Brandon.
Well, I'm excited for you. I mean, I think that trying stuff that's new, sometimes going against what everybody or most people might say is good idea or good practice or whatever, is, that's where a lot of creativity really comes from. I mean, it's that area that people, it's like, where does the information come from? You know what I mean? Like, I think that people sometimes pass along advice that is not lived, things that they learned from their parents or from their teachers or coaches or whatever the heck. And it's like, it might have been relevant then, but it might not be relevant now. There's stuff like that. I think that there's a certain amount of, when you're finding your own way, you might have this inclination to go do something, and it's like, well, that never works, or blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, but, maybe it doesn't, but maybe something inside of you feels like it might. Maybe you feel like the timing's right. Maybe you feel like you have some angle on it that maybe someone missed, and you might have that. And I think it's worth exploring. I wrote a script like, well, I guess it would be about 15 years now, maybe, I don't know, something like that. And yeah, it's been ages, but it was one of the first features I wrote very early on in my writing career. And I remember I showed someone it partway through, and they tore the shit out of it. They were like, you're just writing this for shock value, and like da 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 da, and it's like, this is not good or whatever. And I don't know what got me to do this, but somehow I finished the thing, but I forgot I finished it, and I stuffed it away in a drawer, and I never looked at it again. I printed it off, stuffed it away in a drawer, and I never looked at it again. I forgot that I finished it. This is crazy. This is a full feature-length film I forgot I even wrote. And one day, this is a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I don't know, must have been somewhere around there. And I was digging through a box, and I was like, I pulled it out, and I was like, holy shit, I finished this script. Like, it was like a magic script I had written that I never even realized I finished. And never got made, but I told some people about the concept. And people were like, wow, what a great idea. It's so ahead of its time. You wrote that 10 years ago? Like, and what it was about a guy who was like a narcissist, like a sociopath, like a psychopath, but he didn't know he was. And he couldn't understand why he was having all this trouble in life, and his social relationships were breaking down. He wasn't aware that he had this like lack of empathy and lack of compassion. He just didn't know what was wrong with him, right? And it was like he had a mental illness he wasn't aware of. And what had happened was I had part of the reason why I wrote this script was because I was studying psychology in university, and we were learning about conduct disorder, which turns out to be narcissism and psychopathy and all that. But I didn't really quite know that, but it kind of fascinated me that people had this kind of disorder. And then I was working on a film as an actor, and the co-lead in the film, he was what I'm absolutely 100% sure now was definitely a narcissist, but probably a psychopath. And this guy was in and out of prison, like he was trouble. And I remember when we were on the audition room, and it was him and another guy who was his age, and me and another guy who was my age. And I remember looking across at the two other guys that might get cast and just looking at him and going, I fucking hope that guy doesn't get it, because he just has like a bad fucking vibe. And sure enough, it was him who got it and me who got the other part. And you wouldn't be surprised, he got fired, and they hired on the other guy after a few days of working with him, because he was so toxic on set that they actually fired him, and then they hired the other guy. But I felt really bad for this guy. After I was hanging out with him for a few days, I could tell that he was very troubled, but he had this like sympathy story about how like he was like alone, his girlfriend had cheated on him, like certain things in his life. And I was like, wow, this guy just seems like he needs a friend. And as I started to hang out with him, where I was like, something's fucking wrong with this person, right? Like this guy's I was really trying to see the best in him. And I think in a way, he liked that. And I think he was using me, but he inspired writing this story about this guy with conduct disorder or psychopathy or whatever. And I think it's actually kind of a pretty interesting script, and pretty good actually, considering the age and the stage I was at as a writer. But it just goes to show that I didn't even realize I was ahead of my time writing a story about something that's like commonplace now. And you go online and search narcissist or search psychopath or search sociopath, and you will find an infinite number of videos. There are so many out there. At this time when I wrote it, which was like 15, 16 years ago, this wasn't commonplace. This wasn't what everyone was talking about, and you couldn't just go look for it. So I didn't realize, but I was stumbling across something that actually was a very interesting forward thought. So my point is that finding your path, sometimes it doesn't make sense to everyone else. But for some reason, I felt kind of drawn and interested into this story. And I mean, my story, Evan, so you probably know why there was a fascination with that, and why maybe I've met one or two of these people before in my life, and I was trying to understand them. But I met this guy, and because he was so much more open with me and closer to my age, I suppose, he was almost, he became almost a research subject. And I hate to say it, because I genuinely was trying to be his friend, but after a certain point, I'm like, hey, I don't think this guy's really like a good person to have in my life, but he's fascinating. And then after a certain while, I was like, oh, this guy's bad news. I need to move away from this guy. He ended up having to leave the province and run from the police, because I don't know what he did, but he did something really bad. And so, sometimes I think I dodged a bullet because I was close to someone very dangerous, I think, ultimately. But I mean, you just don't know, and if someone would have said, if I would have known what I was doing, everything inside of me would have said, get out, don't go down this road. This is a bad road to even do not walk down this road with this person. They're going to get you in trouble. Thankfully, I was never around them when they did anything. I don't know what they did exactly, but thankfully I never was. But I mean, finding your path, man. Talk about making quote unquote mistake, and something kind of great coming out of it in a way, right?
Well, I mean, in some ways, what mistake was made? That's the thing. It's by all appearances, you were on your path. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's there you were, a young, hungry, passionate actor, out there auditioning and getting cast in a movie and all this stuff. And you can be on that path. You're still going to be presented with this stuff, right? Like you're still going to be presented with stuff that you just like, there's no way that you can account for these things happening.
No.
Yeah.
And you don't even like the other thing too is like, in some ways, ignorance is bliss. Not knowing, having a naivete about you, like having a kind of innocence about you, can allow you to walk down a road that someone who's wiser and more aware wouldn't, because they'd know better in a way, right? And I'm not saying that wisdom and awareness is not good. I mean, I would prefer to have that, but you know, it definitely, my kind of optimism and just positivity about people and the world, and you know, my idealism, granted me a kind of also my youth probably granted me a certain amount of invincibility. You know, I had a certain kind of like, I'll be okay no matter what happens, everything will be fine, you know. I don't like to say this, but I think the me today, if I encountered someone like that, would probably be like, nope, see you later. Like, I got no time for that. You know what I mean? But hey, you know, I mean, I think I've also had an experience that a lot of people, well, actually, I think a lot of people have these experiences, but I don't know if many people have the experience quite the way I did, you know, where I actually kind of almost pursued it. And not only that, but I researched it. Like this guy was so fascinating. Like, just to give you an idea, we were at a coffee shop one time and we're sitting there and he didn't like that someone was in a seat near us. So he just started like coughing and like being really disgusting and made her leave. And I was like, oh, I can't believe he did that. This guy was like, I mean, also, fuck, I could tell you some really messed up stories about this guy, like just really weird shit that just kind of, I was like, I cannot believe, like, that's a tame story. Like, and to kind of almost follow this person around, kind of like, I wasn't really following them around, but to be around them and experience how they were and what they would do and what they would say and how they would think was so, the thing that fascinated me about him was he seemed so fearless. He had like no shame. He was so charismatic in a certain way. And he just almost had this kind of like these qualities that in a way you're like, wow, like he could do things that most people can't seem to be able to do. Like they just would be too ashamed or they'd be too embarrassed, but he just, you know, and it allowed him to be able to do things that a normal regular person just didn't seem to be able to do. And I found that interesting. But yeah, I guess when you don't have any empathy, you don't have any compassion, and you're like, you know, you have that thing, you know, that's kind of positive in certain respects of like maybe being successful or going for what you want, certain things, but it's also, he just was destructive to every personal relationship he had in his life, and including me. But he got fired from that film. The girl that he had been talking about that like cheated on him, I mean, I started to find out more that he really was probably not very good to her, you know. So there was a lot of, he apparently ran a movie at some point and he was terrible to everybody when he did it. So he was just destroying relationships everywhere. And so, you know, there's this character that I wrote about in this story, and I know I'm going off about this, but it's kind of all related. This character that I wrote about, he had a lot of trouble with his relationships in this movie, and he didn't understand why. He thought he was fine, and he actually kind of almost felt like the victim to it, right? And he was, you know, trying to be understood, and he didn't realize why he was like this. And it was a lot based off of this person that I was just kind of around for a brief time, because I was just fascinated with him. And so I decided to kind of base a character off of him and see if I could narrate a story around it. Which... And then when that person who read it at the time, they said, oh, this is just for shock value, probably because they just didn't believe that a person like this existed. And the stuff that I saw him do and kind of imagined he might do given the opportunity, they found that shocking. But like, this is like a real person. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, some of that stuff's like made up, but the truth was shocking to them. So they were like, oh, you wrote this for shock value. And I remember thinking like, not really, but I was like, well, maybe it doesn't work. I don't know. I guess I was drawn enough to the story. I actually finished the script. So, I mean, that's not the point, but
Yeah, I've never heard of this script of yours, Brandon.
I have talked about it before. I have.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
but not in as much detail with you.
No, definitely not.
no,
Definitely
yeah.
not.
Yeah, it's called stupid title, but I was also like 21. But it was called Predator and Prey. That's the at least the working title of it.
Yeah.
Which I think anybody who knows about a sociopath or psychopath would probably say that title's actually pretty good for someone like that, because that's kind of a little bit about how their world works. I just kind of like this predator prey kind of, they're the wolf and everyone else is the sheep kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Evan with a quick public service announcement. If you're enjoying the conversation you're hearing and finding it helpful, then please help us and take a second to subscribe to the podcast. And we can all be people helping other people, and that's awesome. Now back to the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know where we're... Usually it's like, oh, I got an idea where we can go from here. I don't know where we go from here.
Well,
we'll go somewhere with it.
Okay, let me make a point, and then maybe we can kind of leap off of that. I'll be quick. I think the point is, we've talked a lot about following your curiosity. I think that's a lot about finding your path. You're curious about something. So if you're curious about it, that's enough to go down a path. Curiosity doesn't discern whether the path is quote unquote the right path or the right way, but I think it gets you going. And then once you go down that path, you have more clarity about where else you can go or where maybe not to go. And maybe that's an important part of your journey.
Yeah. And you know what? Like I'm just sort of seeing this now, but curiosity, which we're huge fans of here on the show. Curiosity it's like a branch of wonder. It's a little way in which we exercise wonder in our lives. Like a curiosity is kind of like a small wonder about something. Like it's, and I think that, how can injecting a little more wonder into your life be a bad thing? Like I think that, if we were, if we were truly present, we would just constantly be in wonder all the time about everything. And I think that that's like, there are much worse ways in which you could direct your life. You know what I mean? Than by letting your life be led and directed by wonder.
Yeah.
Right? Like letting that thing take you. Letting it take you. And trusting that, following that. And again, understanding that it doesn't mean that that's just, the end, that's just the start and end of it. It's just a new point. It's just a new point to a new direction to head off into until you find the next wonder and the next wonder and the next wonder. But to be fully with it, at every stage of it, not with your eye on what is the next thing going to be, but really fully being with the wonder that you're with now. I think that's, what a way to live. I want to live more that way. Just me talking
me too,
about it.
Man. Yeah, me too. It's actually a good reminder. I think wonder gives you kind of it's so youthful, it's such a almost childlike kind of playful kind of thing to let yourself have. I think it's so great because it's just, I wonder about that, and you kind of like explore it, and then you discover things. And otherwise, if you don't let yourself have that, you're kind of probably just going to stick to the known and the obvious and the safe, right? And I think there needs to be a certain amount of exploring, in finding your path. Like I think one of the challenges we have is that, like when you're young, a lot of people are like, what are you going to do when you're older? And it's like, well, I'm going to do this. And it's like, you don't know what you're going to do. You had so much yet to learn. There's so much yet to discover and figure out. And it's like, you know, wonder kind of goes like, well, I wonder what that's like. I wonder what this is like. And then you put that in the realm of art, and like, I wonder what would happen if I tried doing this, or I wonder what would happen if I, explored over here. And there's just there's options within the options you have, and there's options within those options. And wonder, it allows you to go down places and into places that were just not seen as available on day one at step one, and, I think that kind of hiking story is sometimes you end up where you would have ended up anywhere. You end up in the same place you would have ended up anyway. And sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But it's either way. It's not really a problem. If you felt that the way you were going was right for you in those moments,
Yeah, absolutely. Like then that's a way of living without any regrets. Like being
Totally.
able to do that. Like it's a way of making empowered choices that are coming from such a beautiful, as you said, like childlike place, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. That's something that I think we have to, we need to fight for that part of ourselves, when the time calls for it. We need to fight for that side. And, you can head down one path that's maybe not the path that you thought you were going to take, but you let wonder guide you, and it takes you somewhere, and maybe it doesn't join up with where that other path would have taken you. But that doesn't mean that stops you either. Maybe that one, it took you to a place that you wouldn't have otherwise seen, and now you're seeing it and you're there, and you can enjoy it and take it all in. But you can always then still go, well, I do wonder what was up that path. And you can go and you can take that path. Like it's interesting. This is for me at least, this is an interesting direction that I didn't expect this conversation to take. And as far as wonder goes, I feel like we've been saying this word over and over and over again now, but I am really seeing the power of this thing, of this question in our lives. And it's so fitting in terms of, as you touched on, Brandon, like as an artist, like so much of what an artist does, particularly when you get to storytellers, like writers and actors and directors and stuff like that. So much of that job is wondering, well, I wonder what would happen if this happened. I wonder what it would look like. I wonder what would happen if I tried this. I wonder what would happen if I tried that. And you see, and you experiment, and you try things, and it all comes out of this place of, there's something that's so genuine about it. I think that's why it's such a powerful, the powerful thing about curiosity and wonder is that there's something so genuine about it. You can't fake it. You can't fake curiosity and wonder. Not really. Like it comes from a certain part of ourselves that like we can't talk ourselves into it or trick ourselves into having a curiosity or a wonder. It's there. It's something that's kind of intrinsic to who we are. And it's a little bit mysterious, which is maybe why sometimes we don't follow it and trust it. But I think that, to live a life like as an artist, and I mean that as in like just to be an artist of life in those terms, it's like you have to honor those things that come up. You have to honor that sense of wonder.
Yeah, you were saying like it's not something you fake. I mean, why would you fake it? I mean, you'd only be faking it to try and prove to someone else that you're curious or wondering. Like,
It's
it's not about that. It's really not about anybody but you. And so it's really one of those things. It's one of the things that it really needs to be done genuinely and authentically. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's not real. It doesn't matter. And there's nothing wrong with wondering really about anything. I mean, you can explore that and look at that. And I think that I think wonder is an interesting thing because it's kind of magical in the sense that it can lead you down paths that just take you to places that you don't know anything about. They're totally exploratory. I think there is I think sometimes you might, if you're wondering about something that, I don't know, like maybe is dark or criminal though. I mean, maybe that's where you kind of like draw the line. I think I think there's a certain amount of like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but it's like entertaining your ideas, I think is not only it's a fun and playful idea, but it can lead you down roads or lead you to places that just open up things for you.
Yeah, I think that one of our laws on here is the law of vision. And I know vision is one of your favorites, Brandon.
Definitely one of my top 10.
It's one of your definitely one of the top 20 for sure.
One of my top 20, yeah.
But I think that wonder is a part of that. Like it's a window into vision. It is a kind of vision of something. Right?
It's because it's a bit of a calling. You've referred to vision as a calling, and I've really like appreciated that take on it, because to me that makes vision more than just what you see. To me a calling is like I hear a calling. It's a sound thing. Where a curiosity. It's kind of like that. It's like it could be a sound, it could be a vision, it could be a sense, a feeling, a smell, a taste. In a sense, it's a sensory type of thing. You want to know. Like there might be something that's gross, like people say is gross, and you're like, well, I want to taste it, so I can decide if it's gross. It's like that can be a part of the investigation of curiosity and wonder. It's like, I wonder what that's like if everyone thinks it's so gross, or I wonder what, and sometimes you want to find out for yourself, and sometimes you have a different experience than what everyone else thinks of it. Right. Which can be a unique discovery. Not everybody has the same taste for stuff. Not everyone, likes the same music, for example. Right. So there's a certain amount of personalization to wonder and curiosity.
Yeah, and again, that's absolutely unique to you.
Yeah.
In a way that you don't have to. I don't know, because our minds are tricky things. They can convince us of all kinds of things about ourselves that are just not true, and I think that's whenever we can kind of figure out a way in which we are actually tapped into what is real, about ourselves, what is true about ourselves, which often comes from a kind of a mysterious place, a part of ourselves that we don't fully understand. But anytime we find some little way in which we can touch upon that and hear that thing a little bit better, I think we're well served to pay attention to what those things are. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I mean, I think is one of those things is like, I think we kind of made the point, right? It's like, yeah, uh, that finding your path is something you do forever. It's an artist take on life, right? Whereas I think a less creative artistic take on life is like, I found my way, I know my way, I'm doing my way, I do it, and it's the way. And I think that most people realize after a while, when you think you have the way and you're just so rigid about it, there's no room for creativity, there's no room for really anything else. And so I think what we're kind of presenting is the idea that don't be so rigid about your way, be open, be flexible, be malleable, be willing to adapt, to keep your eyes open, keep your senses open about it, adjust, like you don't need to just get stuck in something and feel like this is the way, it's the way I've always done it, I made a decision early and this is how life goes. That doesn't have to be your experience of life, or your art or anything. And it can be a constant discovery. And in fact, I would even go as far as to say is that that's the point, that it is a constant discovery, that you never really feel like and the moment you feel like I might even dare to say that that's when it's time to wonder, that's when it's time to get curious and look. The moment you think you have the way, options, I would say that is actually time to open your mind, because otherwise you're just a narrow tunnel visioned limited version of yourself.
Yeah, it's stagnant, and I think that you're pointing to the fact that it might seem to some people a little depressing, to this idea that like you're always finding your way, because some people might take that as being like, well, you're always lost or something. You're always lost. That there's some sort of there's no rest, that there's no and we've been heavily conditioned in our society to have this sense of attaining, that you arrive to a place and that's it. And it's not true. It's just not true, but it's also, more importantly, it's not actually what you want.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not actually what you want. You actually want that path of where you don't know, because that's the path of adventure. That's the path of surprises. That's the path of life occurring, real life, where it's not stagnant, where there's movement, where you can become part of the movement. And so really the trick is for us to get with that motion, to get with that movement, because if you can get with that movement, you find, in a bizarre way, rest. You find rest in that space of change, while you're a part of it. And this is something I've experienced in acting. Great acting, it's just like where you don't know what's going to happen, where you're going. But there's so much joy in it. There's so much, there's a sense of incredible ease when you let go to that, to that thing, when you allow yourself to not know and just be with where you are and pay attention to where you are and let that thing show you where your next footstep is going to land. There's rest there. There's no rest when you're trying to constantly control and steer and conduct things and force things. Like even just saying these words right now, like I feel a tension just in saying those things, right? As opposed to this complete opening up. And it's a real thing. And I shared an experience of how I have understood that through acting. I'm sure that if for many of us, we could comb through our own experiences and say, oh yeah, I've had an experience where, you know what, like I completely let go and I threw out the rule book. I threw out the plan. I threw out, all of this stuff, and there was this experience of life that was just so incredible in that moment or in those moments. See if you can find those experiences in your own life. Like I think this is what is there for us, by embracing that, like, the path is, we're always finding the path.
Mm-hmm. I think every morning you wake up, you have a whole new day to explore, and there is time for rest. There's rest every single day. Every single day you go to sleep and you start again and you do another journey throughout that day. And if you're just walking down the same path every single day and that's not invigorating, that's not entertaining, that's not fulfilling you, then this is when it's time to maybe look, like maybe start to entertain the idea that maybe you're just kind of by rote walking down the same road back and forth all day, and that's not really fulfilling. And so, I think the person who's really truly alive doesn't worry about when they'll rest. I think rest is just kind of like, I'll rest when I'm tired. But the person who's not fulfilled with their life, all they want to do is rest because they're not fulfilled. So they might as well just escape it with rest. I think it goes for that with anybody who's passionate, who's got purpose, who's got a connection to some meaning or something like that. And look, I don't think if you're caught in that, I just want to sleep all day cycle, I think that's not a knock. That's like not that sometimes that's necessary. Look, I actually think something that I've kind of come to realize in my life is I think actually a brief stage of depression is necessary in our journey. I actually think that the depressed, whether it lasts for a day or a week or a month or a year or whatever, or even a few years, if that's what it needs to be for you, is actually a time of reform, a time of finding yourself, a time of discovery, because you just get tired of living a life that you were told to live, someone you were told to be, doing the things you are supposed to do, quote unquote, all of that. And I think that the depression is that you're not living authentically, you're not exploring your life, you're not curious, you're not finding your path. I think that, like, I went through a fucking hell of depression. Like, it was so brutal. If you look at my eyes now, you see life. You should have seen me years ago. Like, there's videos I have of trying to, speak on camera, and it's like, fuck, that guy is hurting. You know what I mean? I found it, but the thing is that I realized that I'm sick of the life and the person that I'm sick of this, and I didn't know what to do, and I was stuck in it for a little bit, but I was determined to get out of it without medication. I'm not saying that medication is bad. I'm not saying that whatever way you find out of it, all power to you. Just find your way out of it. That's all I say. But I was like, okay, no medication. It's just going to be exercise. I'm going to get out. I'm going to push myself to talk to people. I'm going to reevaluate everything I think I love and like and care about. And I'm going to explore. And you know what, man? I'm here today and I'm like, fuck, man. Like, I'm like, how the fuck did I come out of that? But like, I think finding your path sometimes leads you through a dark valley to get to the mountain that you're climbing that's actually more purposeful. And sometimes you got to walk to that valley and just trust that, you know what? Just keep moving. Just keep trucking through it, man. Like, you're going to get through it. Trust that valleys do not last forever. The mountain will come, the light will peer through the forest that you're stuck in, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to imagine it. And you will find your way if you just keep going. Just don't worry, so much about resting or doing it right. Explore. There is a way out of this, if you're in that. And I think that sometimes people are not in a quote unquote depressed state. They don't look depressed, but they are depressed. They're depressed with their life. They're not happy. They're not fulfilled. They're not excited. They drink and do drugs and watch TV, and not to say anything those are bad, but that's all they do. And they eat shit food, and they're just like, I just hate that I do this, but it's like, what's the point? If you're saying that to yourself, that's when it's time to start going, okay, let's look beyond this, because there is a point, and I'm here telling you that, and I'm the guy yelling from the mountain, not to say that I'm any better than you, but I can say that I've been there, and I can say that that's the thing you need to hear, that there are people who have made it through, and you can too. And life requires, it asks of you, it begs of you to find your path. It's there, it's in you, and it's innate. Like, you have it in your spirit, in your soul, in your center. You know, I don't care if you're spiritual or religious or anything. It's not even what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about something fucking animates you, and that has a path in it. So go find it. And if you got to keep looking for it day after day after day, that's probably a good thing. It's much better than just trying to be like, when do I rest? When do I rest? You'll rest when you need, sleep when you need to sleep, eat when you need to eat, play when you play, work when you work, but don't stop. Don't stop living, you know? Don't give up. Don't give up on your life and just exist. You know, finding your path is just acknowledging that you're more than existing. You know, there's more to this than just existing through this life. And I know I'm kind of on a little pedestal here.
No,
that's a good word.
That was a fantastic pedestal, my friend. I'm like, geez. But like, I don't like, I was like, we should just stop recording. We should just leave it at that. We should just end it there.
Well, I appreciate that.
So let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up.
What are you drinking,
like,
sir?
after that,
what are you drinking?
I'm drinking, Centricity. No, sorry, not Centricity. Citricity. Grapefruit zest. I think it's an IPA. It's an IPA. And it's from Phillips.
Nice.
Phillips Brewing. It's great. It's delicious. It's yummy.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. I'm having one that's called the Pilsner Plunge. It's a Czech Pilsner, and it's from How Sound Brewing. Got a little too ahead of myself.
There's definitely a Hound Brewing out there somewhere.
Hound, yeah. How Sound Brewing. Pilsner Plunge. It's pretty tasty. I got to admit, it's a good beer. It's actually, I didn't realize this because I didn't really read all the details about it, but it's got a malt profile to it. This says a crisp hop and a malt profile, which I'd say is extremely accurate to this beer. It's a little more malty than I would generally have. To me, this is more of a fall beer. Like, it's summer right now for us, but to me, this is more of a beer I would probably be like, yeah, it's a nice fall beer. It's kind of nice, and it's got a nice body to it, a nice kind of malty, like, heaviness to it. It's very, very flavorful, very tasty. I don't regret it by any means, but yeah, I would probably choose to have this beer during fall, probably. Just a note.
All right. Well, we're almost there. We're almost there.
So
okay.
All right.
I mean, I don't know. That was such a hard thing. That's such a hard thing to follow up on, Brandon. That last.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just say this, man. Guys, we just created a website, wayoftheartist.com. I know I've been talking about it a little bit. We've been talking about it, but I'm excited about it. And, I want to share that with everybody. So if you guys are, if you're interested, go check it out. I think we put together a pretty cool little thing, and there's a free gift on there for people who are interested in that. Yeah. And, man, I mean, all these conversations, they're always great. I think we have them, and then I walk away and I go, this is a good reminder about just to hone my craft and what I'm doing here and what you're doing, I'm sure. So, and then I think sometimes every time I'm saying stuff to other people, I'm also saying it to myself. It's like, there's always a little bit of yeah, I can use that, and I think that's the important part of these conversations for me. Some of the things you say and some of the things I say, I feel like they're just as much for us as everybody else. And we walk away going, okay, great. I'm a little more clear on what I'm going to do. And yeah, so yeah, it's been good for that.
Yeah. You know what? I think these conversations, they're really, for me, it's about fighting in a way, but not fighting in in some sort of violent clash, but it's us standing up for the truest thing that we are. And yeah, that's what these conversations are for me, and for all of us to do that. And these conversations are a constant reminder just for myself to continue finding your path. Like, as we've been talking about, keep finding it and keep finding it and keep finding it. It's a beautiful thing to do. It's a beautiful way to live your life. And, and we get distracted. And when we get distracted from it, that's usually when things get hardest. When our focus isn't on it's not on the right things. Our mind is not on that calling, on that sort of that wonder, which was such a terrific thing, a beautiful thing that came up in this conversation, was just that life of wonder. And as you said, sort of towards the tail end of your thing, like continuing, always finding your path is about more than just existing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.